Emily and Michael Thompson's love story began as a fairy tale. They met during their sophomore year of college, a time when both were full of youthful exuberance and unbounded optimism about the future. Michael was studying architecture, always sketching buildings, and dreaming of constructing something that would stand the test of time. Emily, on the other hand, was pursuing a degree in psychology, fascinated by the complexities of the human mind and heart. They crossed paths at a campus event, and the connection was instant. Emily was drawn to Michael's quiet confidence and his ability to see beauty in the mundane, while Michael was captivated by Emily's warmth and her insightful nature. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Late-night study sessions turned into deep conversations about life, love, and their dreams. They explored the city together, discovering hidden cafes and quiet parks, making each place their own private world. Michael often surprised Emily with sketches of her or the places they visited, capturing their moments together in pencil and ink. Emily kept a journal, filling it with her thoughts about their relationship, each entry a testament to the deep love she felt for Michael. They were inseparable, and their friends often remarked on how perfectly they complemented each other. After graduation, it seemed only natural for them to get married. They were young, in love, and full of dreams. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, attended by close family and friends. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other forever, neither could have imagined that one day those vows would be tested in ways they were unprepared for. They moved into a charming little house in the suburbs, a fixer-upper that Michael eagerly took on as his first personal project. Emily, always supportive, filled the house with warmth and love, making it a home. Their future seemed bright, with plans for a family, career advancements, and a life filled with love. But as the years passed, the very foundation of their relationship would be shaken, and the fairy tale would slowly begin to unravel. It was early morning when Emily woke up alone, the sun casting a faint glow through the curtains of their once cozy bedroom. She instinctively reached for the other side of the bed, but it was cold, empty. Michael had left early again. This had become the new norm, her waking up to an empty bed, and the house eerily quiet. A sigh escaped her lips as she reluctantly got up, feeling the chill of the hardwood floor beneath her feet, a stark contrast to the warmth she used to feel in their relationship. As she made her way to the kitchen, she found the now familiar sight, a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting, don't wait up, love, Michael." Emily picked up the note, staring at the words that once would have comforted her. The words were still there, love Michael, but they felt hollow, lacking the sincerity they once held. She crumpled the note in frustration, feeling a pang in her chest. Where did things go wrong? She remembered the days when Michael would wake up with her, make them breakfast, and they would talk about their plans for the day. They used to sit at this very table, laughing, sharing stories, making plans for the future. Now it was just silence, the clinking of dishes, and the sound of the clock ticking, each tick a reminder of the growing distance between them. Emily glanced around the kitchen, noticing the little things that hadn't been touched in weeks. The stack of mail that Michael hadn't sorted through, the books he had stopped reading halfway, the dust gathering on the windowsill. Everything seemed to reflect the state of their relationship, neglected, distant, and cold. She missed the warmth, the connection they once shared. She missed the spontaneous dates, the late-night talks, the way Michael used to look at her like she was the most important person in the world. Now she felt like a stranger in her own marriage, living with a man who was physically present but emotionally absent. Determined to salvage what was left, Emily decided she would try harder. She would find a way to reconnect with Michael, to remind him of the love they once shared. But deep down, she feared that it might already be too late, that the distance between them had grown too vast to bridge. The evening air was thick with tension. As Michael finally walked through the front door, his shoulders slumped from exhaustion. Emily was already in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on dinner. She had prepared his favorite meal: roast chicken with rosemary and garlic, mashed potatoes, and a side of steamed vegetables. She hoped that the familiar comfort of a home-cooked meal might spark something between them, a reminder of the simpler, happier times. Michael walked in, greeted her with a half-hearted kiss on the cheek, and mumbled a quick apology for being late. Busy day at work, H. Like a knife, Michael wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words, because deep down, he wasn't sure if they would be. And so they lay there, side by side, but miles apart, each lost in their own thoughts, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. The decision came weeks later, after countless nights of restless sleep and endless days of strained conversations. The tension between them had reached a breaking point, and both Emily and Michael knew that something had to give. They could no longer go on like this, living in a house filled with silence, pretending that everything was fine when it was anything but. They agreed to meet at the park, the one where they had spent so many happy hours in the past. It was early autumn, and the trees were beginning to shed their leaves, the ground covered in a blanket of orange and gold. The crisp air carried a sense of finality, as if nature itself was mirroring the state of their relationship. Emily arrived first, sitting on the bench where they used to sit together, talking about their hopes and dreams. She looked around, taking in the familiar sights and sounds, but they no longer brought her the comfort they once did. Instead, they felt like remnants of a life that was slipping away from her, a life she could no longer hold on to. Michael arrived a few minutes later, his face etched with fatigue and sadness. He sat down beside her, leaving a small gap between them, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had grown between them. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, watching as the leaves fell gently to the ground, neither knowing how to start the conversation they both dreaded. It was Emily who finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, I think we need to face the truth. We're not happy anymore, and pretending isn't helping." Michael nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I've been thinking the same. I don't want to hurt you, Emily, but I don't know if we can find our way back to each other. We've tried, but maybe it's time to let go." Emily felt a lump in her throat as she listened to his words. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Maybe it's time to let go," she repeated, her voice shaking. "We've tried, but sometimes love isn't enough." Michael reached for her hand, and she let him take it, their fingers intertwining for what felt like the last time. They sat there, holding on to each other, knowing that this was the end of their journey together. It was a moment filled with sorrow, but also a sense of acceptance. They both knew that this decision, as painful as it was the right one. The park, once a place of joy and laughter, now felt like a place of mourning. They shared one final embrace, not out of passion, but out of a deep sadness for what they had lost. As they pulled away, they looked at each other, tears in their eyes, knowing that this was their final goodbye. They stood up, each feeling the weight of the moment, and walked away in opposite directions, the distance between them growing with each step. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, a poignant reminder of the life they had shared and the future that would never be. The finality of their decision weighed heavily on Emily as she walked home alone, her heart heavy with grief. The house, once a sanctuary filled with love and laughter, now felt like a hollow shell. Each step she took felt like a step further away from the life she had known, the life she had cherished. As she entered the empty house, the silence was deafening. The familiar creaks of the floorboards, the ticking of the clock, all felt like echoes of a life that was no longer hers. She looked around, taking in the remnants of their life together, the photos on the walls, the books on the shelves, the little knickknacks they had collected over the years. Each item held a a piece of the life they had built together, now shattered. Emily walked into the kitchen, where she had spent so many mornings preparing breakfast for Michael, where they had shared countless meals and conversations. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they had once planned their future together. But now, that future was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of loss. The tears she had been holding back finally came, spilling down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. She cried for the love they had lost, for the dreams that would never come true, for the life they would never share. The pain was unbearable, a deep, aching void that consumed her entire being. But as the tears flowed, Emily also felt a sense of release. The decision had been made, and there was no going back. She knew that this was the end of one chapter of her life, and the beginning of another. It was a chapter, Fee. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now stood as a testament to a love that had faded slowly but surely. And as Emily sat there, she knew that she would carry the memories of that love with her, even as she stepped into the unknown future. The love may have faded, but it would never be forgotten. The days that followed were a blur of emotions for Emily. She went through the motions of daily life, but everything felt hollow, as if a part of her was missing. The house, once filled with the sounds of two people in love, now echoed with the emptiness of her solitude. Each room held memories, reminders of what she had lost, and it was hard to escape the weight of those memories. Emily spent most of her time in the kitchen, the heart of their home, where she had always found comfort in cooking and baking. But now, the joy of preparing meals had vanished. She would often find herself standing at the counter, staring blankly at the ingredients, unable to muster the energy to create anything. The passion she once had for cooking, something that had brought her and Michael together, had faded along with their love. She tried to keep herself busy, filling her days with chores and errands. But the loneliness was always there, lurking in the background. Nights were the hardest. The bed felt too big, too empty. Without Michael beside her, she would lie awake for hours, her mind racing with thoughts of what could have been, what she could have done differently. But no matter how much she replayed the past, she knew that the outcome would have been the same. One night, unable to sleep, Emily went into the living room and sat down on the couch. She looked around at the familiar surroundings, the photos of her and Michael on their wedding day, the souvenirs from their trips together, the little mementos of a life they had once shared. The pain in her chest was almost unbearable, a deep aching sorrow that threatened to overwhelm her. She reached for one of the photo albums on the coffee table and opened it. The pages were filled with pictures of happier times, vacations, holidays, anniversaries. Each photo captured a moment of joy, a time when they had been so in love, so sure of their future together. But now, those moments felt like they belonged to someone else, another life that she could no longer reach. As she turned the pages, tears began to fall, one by one, onto the glossy photos. She tried to hold them back, but the floodgates had opened, and there was no stopping the torrent of emotions that came rushing out. She cried for the love that had faded, for the dreams that would never come true, for the future that had been lost. The weight of it all was crushing, and she felt like she might drown in her own grief. But as the tears flowed, Emily also felt a strange sense of relief. She had been holding everything in for so long, trying to be strong, trying to keep it together. But now, in the quiet of the night, alone with her memories, she finally allowed herself to feel the full extent of her pain. It was a cathartic release, a necessary step in her journey of healing. When the tears finally subsided, Emily closed the photo album and set it aside. She wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be many more nights like this, filled with tears and heartache. But she also knew that she would get through it, that she would find a way to rebuild her life, one step at a time. The love she had shared with Michael was gone, but it would always be a part of her. It had shaped her, taught her, and made her who she was. And while it was painful to let go, she knew that it was the only way to move forward, to find peace and happiness once again. As she stood up and walked back to her bedroom, Emily felt a small flicker of hope in her heart. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there, a reminder that life would go on, that she would find a way to heal. And with that thought, she crawled into bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and closed her eyes, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below. He said, his tone weary. Emily forced a smile, trying to hide her disappointment. She had been looking forward to this dinner, hoping it would be a chance for them to talk, to reconnect. But Michael's mind seemed elsewhere, as it often was these days. They sat down at the table, the clinking of silverware, the only sound filling the room. Emily tried to make small talk, asking about his day, but the conversation felt forced. Michael responded in short, curt sentences, his eyes fixed on his plate. The once easy and natural flow of conversation between them had turned into a strained exchange of words, each more painful than the last. Desperate to break the tension, Emily brought up a memory from their past. Do you remember our trip to the coast? That tiny bed and breakfast, the one with the beautiful view of the ocean. We should go back sometime, just the two of us. Her voice was hopeful, filled with a longing to recapture the magic of their earlier days together. But Michael barely looked up from his plate. Yeah, maybe, he said distractedly. I've got a lot on my plate right now, though. His response was like a dagger to Emily's heart. The lack of enthusiasm, the dismissiveness. It was clear that the trip meant nothing to him anymore. It was just another memory, lost in the sea of responsibilities and stresses that had taken over their lives. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to keep it together. She felt a growing sense of frustration and helplessness. It was as if she was reaching out to someone who was already gone, trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. The man she once knew, the man she fell in love with, seemed to be a shadow of his former self, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to reach him. Dinner ended in silence, the once comforting space of their home, now filled with an unbearable emptiness. Michael excused himself early, retreating to the living room to watch television, while Emily stayed behind, staring at the remnants of their meal. The connection they once shared, the love that used to fill their home, was now replaced with an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Emily wondered how much longer she could keep pretending that everything was okay, when it was clear that their marriage was falling apart. The nights had become the hardest part for Emily. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she could hear the steady rhythm of Michael's breathing beside her. He was there, physically, but the emotional distance between them was palpable. The man she used to confide in, the man who once held her close and whispered sweet nothings in her ear, now felt like a stranger. The silence between them was suffocating, a constant reminder of how far they had drifted apart. Emily's mind raced as she lay there, replaying their recent interactions over and over. The coldness, the indifference, the way Michael seemed to have checked out of their marriage. She couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was clear that they were both miserable. With her heart pounding in her chest, she turned to him, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "Michael," she whispered, hoping not to wake him too suddenly. But he was already awake, staring at the ceiling, just like she had been. He sighed deeply, as if he knew what was coming. "What is it, Emily?" His voice was tired, weary, like a man who had run out of things to say. "What's happening to us?" she asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "I feel like we're losing each other, and I don't know how to stop it." Michael didn't respond right away. He closed his eyes, rubbing his temples as if trying to find the right words. "I'm just stressed, Emily. Work is demanding, and I'm doing my best to keep up. But I know things haven't been the same between us." Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "It's not just work, Michael. We don't talk like we used to. We don't laugh. We don't connect anymore. I miss you. I miss us." Michael finally turned to face her, his expression softening. He reached out to touch her hand, but his touch felt distant, almost perfunctory. I miss us too, but I don't know how to fix this. Maybe we've just grown apart. The words hit Emily like a ton of bricks. Grown apart. It was what she had feared the most, the realization that despite all their efforts, they might be beyond saving. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she turned away from him, unable to hold back the flood of emotions any longer. Michael watched her, feeling a pang of guilt and sadness. He hated seeing her like this, hated that he couldn't be the husband she needed him to be. But he was exhausted, exhausted from work, from the pressure of trying to hold everything together, and from the constant feeling that no matter what he did, it was never enough. The room was filled with the sound of Emily's quiet sobs, each one cutting through the silence.
I discovered my wife's cheating, unraveled a dark plot, and got revenge on her affair partner. Seated at my desk, I checked my watch. It was almost 4. Soon I'd head home to kick off the weekend. This one was extra special, marking 20 years since I married Katie. I couldn't wait to whisk her away for a romantic weekend at our lake house. I picked up Katie's photo, a cherished gift from years ago, reminding me of our love. By the way, I'm Thomas West, but you can call me Tom. Katie and I fell in love in high school and tied the knot shortly after graduation. She insisted on waiting until our wedding day for closeness, and she was right. It made our honeymoon unforgettable. My parents were thrilled for us, giving me and keys to a townhouse to start. Dad explained it was just the beginning of a $1 million trust fund he set up after my birth. He rarely spoke of my biological mom, who passed when I was young, remarrying soon after. Rejected from the military due to diabetes, I pursued college with Katie. We dreamed of our futures until Jim, our son, arrived earlier than planned. Despite challenges, Katie became a teacher while I entered the business world, joining Ryder Industries. When I shared the news with Dad, he seemed proud but distant. I sensed something was amiss, but I refrained from pressing him. That's why I ultimately left the corporate world behind. For the next 16 years, life followed a typical routine. We worked, cared for our family, and enjoyed annual vacations. Due to time constraints, I quit martial arts classes about 5 years into marriage. Though Dad suggested exploring career options, I didn't dwell on it. Overall, Katie and I were content, despite the usual marital ups and downs. However, recently, I noticed changes in Katie's behavior. Initially, I attributed her mood shifts to the end of the school year and her reduced workload. She seemed withdrawn and occasionally sharp with me. I tried discussing it, but she brushed it off. Meanwhile, I was in the running for a VP position, competing with Alex Marr. Keeping the news to myself, I didn't think it influenced her behavior. Then it hit me. Our son Jim's graduation and acceptance to West Point might be causing her anxiety about an empty nest. To lift her spirits, I planned a surprise anniversary getaway. As I pondered this, my secretary's call interrupted. It was about a meeting with Jake Henderson, the CEO, likely regarding a promotion. I rose from my desk, tidied my tie in the bathroom mirror, and headed to the elevator, ensuring my smartphone was set to record the coming meeting. Arriving on the TH floor, home to the company's top brass, I made my way to Henderson's suite, where his assistant, Brenda, welcomed me. "Mr. Henderson is ready for you, Mr. West," she said, her grin piquing my curiosity. Henderson's voice invited me inside. As I entered his office, taking a seat opposite him, Harvey, one of Henderson's guards, poured me bourbon, a gesture of familiarity with my preferences. Henderson, relaxed in demeanor, took a sip of his drink before addressing me with a smile. After exchanging pleasantries, Henderson praised my politeness and inquired about my family. I assured him all was well, mentioning our son's recent departure for West Point and our upcoming 20th anniversary celebration. "Married for 2 decades?" Jake inquired, offering congratulations. "I called you here not to mess with you. I like you. Let's discuss my upcoming promotion. It's between you and Marlo. The board needs to gauge your flexibility, your response to stress, and your dedication to our goals. Understand, a manager's day doesn't end at—" "I get it," I replied. "What specifics does the board seek?" "They want to witness your reactions firsthand," Jake explained. "They've reviewed your records, but they need more." "I'm not sure I follow," I admitted. Jake grinned, sipping his bourbon. "You'll get it," he assured. "How's your marriage?" "Solid, Mr. Henderson," I affirmed, sipping my drink. "Why do you ask?" "If it's as strong as you claim, cancel your weekend plans," he instructed. "Your wife should understand." He signaled Harvey, who ushered in Lenny Jameson, accompanied by Katie. She wore a revealing dress, surprising me with her appearance. The dress barely covered her backside. Though she glanced my way, she seemed unaware of me observing her medicated state. I noticed something white in one nostril. "Katie," I addressed her. "What's going on? Why are you dressed like that?" She remained unresponsive, her eyes glazed. Turning to Henderson, I demanded clarification. "What's happening? Why is she here like this? She's clearly medicated." "What did you give her?" Henderson chuckled, admitting to medicating her with a potent concoction. He gestured for Lenny to expose her further, revealing her bosom. I attempted to rise but found myself paralyzed, realizing Harvey had medicated me too. Henderson's sinister grin widened as Lenny undressed Katie completely, ignoring my protest. Henderson proceeded to engage in carnal acts with her, her glazed eyes betraying her medicated state. Furious and struggling against Harvey's grip, I glared at Henderson. "I'll eliminate you," I yelled. Henderson smirked. "Is that how you speak to family?" he taunted. "And in front of your dear wife?" She won't be my wife, I snapped. And what do you mean by family? Henderson revealed our shared parentage, shocking me. That's not true, I protested. Why? For many reasons, he explained. Firstly, as CEO, I have executive privilege. Secondly, I've always wanted to dominate my younger brother. You didn't think I hired you for your skills, did you? He revealed his calculated manipulation, claiming it was a long-term plan to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. Have you planned this all along? I demanded. Of course, he admitted. It's the long game. Now, your fate and your wife's are in my hands. He outlined his intention to seek revenge for past grievances, shocking me with his twisted motives. You're sick, I accused. Henderson shrugged. Maybe, he conceded. It is what it is. Here's the plan, Tom, he began again. No divorce. Your wife now serves me financially and personally. She's my exclusive companion, accessible anytime, anywhere. I'm whisking her to New York for a board presentation. Relax. She'll return, albeit perhaps disheveled. You won't get away with this, I retorted. He chuckled. Deal, he countered. You're powerless. He signaled Lenny, who struck me, apologizing. Just business, Mr. West. I awoke in a hospital bed, machines humming around me. Dad, exhausted, sat nearby. A nurse tended to me, offering ice. Dad explained I'd been unconscious for 4 days since Friday night. 4 days? I echoed. It's Tuesday, Dad confirmed. You were dumped at the ER. What happened? He asked, concern etched on his face. Later, upon the doctor's arrival, I acknowledged him. Good afternoon, Mr. West. I'm Dr. Pierce, he greeted. I'm glad to see you with us again. How do you feel? It's like I was hit by a truck, I replied. Everything hurts. I have no doubt, he concurred, noting my injuries. You've been pretty banged up. Nothing broken, but some bruised ribs and a small bruise. We were worried about a concussion. After his examination, he outlined the plan. We'll do x-rays and keep you overnight for observation. If all goes well, you can go home tomorrow. My dad called the police, I mentioned. They want to speak with you, he informed me. Afterward, Detective Blackstone introduced himself, eager to hear my story. I recounted what I could, then remembered my phone. Did you find my phone? I asked my father. Yes, he said, handing it over. I noticed unfamiliar text messages and decided to check them later. I found the audio recording and played it for the detective, capturing everything, including the sounds of the assault. I focused on what occurred afterward. Okay, get him out of here, Henderson ordered the guards. Take him to the hospital and say you found him there. Got it? Got it, boss, Lenny affirmed. We heard movement as they dragged me, then their conversation as they placed me in the car. Careful, Harvey cautioned. I don't want blood on the seats. He's a real pain, Lenny chuckled. Aren't they all? Harvey laughed before the recording ended. We have hospital security footage, Ryan explained. They threw you out of the car before driving off. EMTs found you and brought you inside. The car is registered to Ryder Industries. I informed HR, Dad added. Henderson already put you on sick leave for a week. Any word from Katie? I inquired. Dad shook his head. None, he replied. I've been trying to reach her, but no luck. We'll issue a bulletin, Ryan declared. Do you have a recent photo? Yes, I confirmed, retrieving my pictures. Okay, he agreed. Send this to me, along with the audio recording. I'll forward the photo to the NYPD and issue a warrant for Henderson and his thugs. Do you want to press charges? Absolutely, I affirmed. Definitely. Then we'll proceed, he assured. Just relax and let the professionals handle it, he advised. Okay, Detective, I acknowledged gratefully. Thank you. We'll keep in touch, Ryan promised, handing me his card. Call if you remember anything else. After he left, I turned to my father. Is what Henderson said true? I inquired. Yes and no, he replied. His father had his way with your biological mother, but she was already pregnant. After that, I filed for divorce and an alienation of affection lawsuit against Henderson. We couldn't do a DNA test back then, but we all have the same blood type, Dad said. He wouldn't bore me with all the details, but things at home worsened. My biological mother turned to drinking and medications, eventually dying from an overdose 6 months after I was born. Damn, I reacted. The lawsuit against Henderson and Ryder was ongoing, Dad revealed, but they settled out of court using the money to set up my trust fund. He couldn't disclose any details due to the agreement. About a year later, he met Patricia. She loved you from the start, insisting on adopting you after we got married. Unable to have children, she considered you her own. So, how did you know I was really your son? I asked. Remember the motorcycle accident when you were 16? He queried. Yeah, I recalled. Well, he elaborated, after I was injured, I requested a DNA test at the hospital to confirm our relationship, and I pressed. The results showed over a 99% likelihood that I'm your father, he explained. It means your biological mother was pregnant with you before Henderson's involvement. For me, you're my dad no matter what, I assured him, bringing a smile to his face. What happened to Henderson, I inquired. Dad informed me he died from a stroke around the time I entered college. His son stepped up as the new general director. I'd hoped the younger Henderson had learned from his father's mistakes, but I was mistaken, Dad explained. That's why you weren't thrilled about me joining there, right? I questioned. He nodded. Yes, he affirmed. I wished to tell you, but I couldn't. I appreciate it now. It's not on you, Dad, I reassured. I can't fathom how Katie could fall for his nonsense after all this time. It's baffling, I remarked. She may have been medicated, but something feels off. I pondered why she was there and in that attire. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Yes? I called out. Brenda, Henderson's assistant, peeked in. May I come in? She asked timidly. Certainly, Brenda, I welcomed her. What's up? She entered, holding a bouquet of flowers and a large card. We all pitched in and got this for you, she explained, placing the flowers on the nightstand. She handed me the card. I'm really sorry about all of this, Brenda expressed. Did you know what Henderson planned? I inquired. I knew he had something with your wife, she admitted, but not this. She added, pointing to me, what went down? I probed. That morning he gave me a company card, told me to fetch your wife, said she was expecting me. He instructed me to take her out, get her a revealing dress, and then to a salon, Brenda disclosed. He also insisted that she get a bikini wax. A full wax? I questioned. Yeah, a Brazilian wax, Brenda recounted. I had a pretty good idea of what he meant. This isn't the first time he's pulled something like this. So your boss is using you to groom his girls? Dad questioned. Brenda's face flushed red, and she wisely averted her gaze. Did you know he medicated her? Dad pressed. He medicates all the women he sleeps with, Mr. West, she admitted. He loves to experiment. Has he ever medicated you? Dad inquired. She nodded. One time, she disclosed. He gave me just a small amount, she continued. Said it was only a quarter of the normal dose. It kept me going for about an hour. Do you know how much he gave my wife? I interjected. She shook her head. No, I don't, she admitted. He mentioned giving Katie 3 times the usual amount. I informed her. Her eyes widened, and she covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, she exclaimed. I had no clue. Your poor wife must have been out of her mind for hours. I bet she didn't even realize you were there. This stuff really messes you up. When I walked into your office, you knew what was going to happen, didn't you? I probed. She nodded solemnly. I knew, she confirmed, but I didn't expect him to be so cruel to you, honestly. Do you know where Henderson and my wife are now? I asked. Last I heard, they're still in New York, she replied. Would you be willing to talk to the police? Dad asked. I'll do whatever I can to help, she promised. She glanced back at me with tears in her eyes. I'm truly sorry about this, Mr. West. Just one more thing, Brenda, I added. What's going on? She inquired. Did my wife have any idea what was going to happen? I questioned. She nodded. I'm pretty sure she had an idea, Mr. West, she replied. I know Mr. Henderson has been in touch with her quite often in the past month or so, inviting her out to dinner multiple times. They've had long lunches. I'm not sure if anything happened between them or not. He never disclosed it to me. But do you think they were involved? I pressed. It's highly probable, but I can't say for certain. I'm not privy to all the details, she admitted. You seem to assist Henderson with things like this. Frequently, correct? Dad inquired. Quite frequently, she admitted quietly. So you condone his behavior, he probed. She shook her head. You misunderstand, she clarified. I'm a single mother with a child who has special needs, and Mr. Henderson compensates me generously for my assistance and my discretion. Well, your silence is what led to my son ending up in the hospital this time, young lady, he retorted, his patience waning. She took a step back as he glared at her. Mr. West, I truly didn't know they intended injury to your son. I would have warned him if I had known, she defended herself. Dad reclined in his chair, silently observing her. Brenda, the police detective will be reaching out to you regarding this matter, I informed her. I advise you to be available and fully cooperate. Understand? She nodded. I understand, Mr. West, she affirmed. All right, I said, and please convey my gratitude to everyone for the flowers and card. I will, she promised, dabbing at a tear in her eye. Once again, I'm sorry. With that, she turned and exited the room. After the door closed, I turned to my father. That sheds some light on things, I remarked. Katie has been acting a bit off since school ended. Initially, I thought it was because Jim had gone to West Point. We'll uncover the truth, he assured. Another knock sounded and a hospital attendant wheeled in a food cart. Dad grinned and rose. Dinner time, he announced. Better head home before Mom sends out a search party, he joked. Take care, son. Rest up. See you in the morning. Thanks, Dad, I replied. Say hi to Mom for me and tell her I love her. We do, son, he affirmed. And hey, love you too. We fist bumped, and he exited. The attendant smirked at Dad's departure, then served my meal. It smelled decent, and hunger gnawed at me after days without eating. I devoured the meatloaf and potatoes, relishing the mushroom sauce. Though not up to Mom's or Katie's caliber, it sufficed. Even the broccoli, which I usually avoid, tasted all right. After finishing dessert, I sipped coffee and checked my texts. 4 messages awaited, each with a video. The first from Friday read, "Enjoy. Bet you wish you weren't here." Unfamiliar, I hesitantly opened it. Katie stood before grinning men, her dress akin to the one Henderson forced her to wear. Recognizing the board members, I braced for the worst. They stripped her, and she complied. Anguish brooded, it had bolstered the lawsuit. Summoning courage for the next message from Saturday morning, regret filled me as Katie frolicked with men. The third, late Saturday, depicted her with multiple partners. The fourth, from early Sunday, diverged. Katie and Henderson stared into the camera. Her bloodshot eyes and dark circles revealed torment. Henderson sneered. "This is your wife's new life," he taunted. Turning to Katie, he commanded, "Tell him who I am, honey." "Jake Henderson is my master," she stated, her voice devoid of any emotion. "That's correct," he confirmed. "And what's your new role?" Henderson inquired. "I am my master's undressed lovemaking toy," she declared. "I engage in carnal activities with whomever he commands, whenever he commands, and however he commands, as frequently as he commands." "Very well," Jake acknowledged, "and convey to that idiot that he won't ever touch you again." "You betrayed man," Katie asserted, pointing a finger at the camera. "You'll never lay a hand on me again." Henderson chuckled at her remark before addressing the camera. "And remember," he said, "don't cause trouble, or the next time I have Harvey and Lenny talk to you, you might not wake up. See you later, loser. Goodbye." The video concluded. A surge of emotions washed over me: hatred, anger, sadness, disappointment. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed and heard. It seemed evident that he had manipulated her. I glanced at the wedding ring on my finger. It held no significance anymore. So I removed it and tossed it onto the nightstand. Perhaps I could sell it for a few bucks at a pawn shop. At that instant, I was resolved to divorce Katie. I didn't care if Jake approved or not. Furthermore, I was determined to make him suffer. But how? Alienation of affection lawsuits were a possibility when my father divorced, but not anymore. I entertained thoughts of damaging that despicable fool, but in all honesty, he wasn't worth jeopardizing my freedom for. I contacted Ryan and briefed him on the videos and Henderson's threats. He requested that I forward them to him and assured me he'd be in touch. Following his instructions, I powered off my phone. I contemplated reaching out to Kathy, but concluded it would be futile. I placed my phone on the nightstand and turned on the TV, hoping to distract myself from what I had just witnessed. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep and found myself dreaming of happier times when I had a loving and faithful wife. The next morning, I awoke to the sounds of nurses bustling about my room, checking my vital signs and monitoring the equipment. 2 of them escorted me to the radiology department for additional x-rays before returning me to my room. Once back, an orderly brought me breakfast. Shortly after I finished my bacon and egg breakfast, Dr. Pierce entered my room with good news. "Everything went smoothly, and you're clear to go home," he informed me. He prescribed medication for the pain and provided a set of instructions. "Discharge paperwork will take about an hour, so why not give your parents a call to come pick you up?" he suggested. "By the time they arrive, you should be ready to go. Take care of yourself and make sure to schedule a follow-up appointment with your regular doctor within a week." "Thank you, Doc," I replied. "I'll do that." After he left, I contacted my parents and shared the positive news. About an hour later, they arrived at my room. Mom enveloped me in a hug, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Oh, Tom, I'm so sorry you had to go through this," she expressed. "How are you feeling?" "Could be better, Mom," I admitted. "Well, I whipped up some of my lasagna for you and kept it warm in the oven," she informed me. I always adored my mother's lasagna. It was rich with layers of cheese, mushrooms, and meat filling, a taste sensation unlike any other. I looked at her with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom," I said sincerely. "Your lasagna never fails to brighten my day." "I'm glad, son," she replied. Your father filled me in on what happened, and I'm furious. I have half a mind to give that woman a piece of my mind. Dad and I exchanged a knowing glance and chuckled. There was no doubt in my mind that if she were here, Mom would have taken Katie to task. Any updates? Dad inquired. I briefed him on the videos and Henderson's threat. Videos? Mom questioned. Trust me, Mom, you don't want to see them, I cautioned. They're beyond awful. I guess you'll need the name of a good divorce attorney, Dad remarked. Yeah, I agreed. There's no way to overlook what she did or is probably still doing, plus I need to break it to Jim, or it's going to devastate him. All right, I'll make some calls, Dad promised. Just then, a nurse entered with my discharge papers and instructions. Insisting I use a wheelchair, she wheeled me out while Mom and Dad walked alongside. At the loading dock, I slid into the back seat. Dad drove us home, stopping at a pharmacy so I could pick up my pain medication. I noticed my car parked in the driveway when we arrived. Your mom and I retrieved your car from Ryder on Saturday, Dad informed me. Kat's car is still in the garage. We entered the house, and its emptiness without Katie became painfully apparent. The aroma of lasagna wafting from the oven lifted my spirits a tad. I hope you don't mind, but I tidied up a bit yesterday afternoon, Mom mentioned. It was getting a bit stuffy. Not at all, Mom, I assured her. Thanks for everything. Just then, we spotted a dark sedan parked outside. I recognized Ryan stepping out of the driver's side, accompanied by another man in a suit. I welcomed them in. Detective Blackstone, I greeted. Please come in. I held the door as they entered. Ryan shook my hand and I introduced him to Mom. Can we offer you gentlemen something to drink? Mom offered. Coffee soda? Ryan declined. No, ma'am, but thank you, he replied. Then, turning to the other man. Mr. West, this is Detective Hawthorne from the NYPD Homicide Department. I was taken aback momentarily but extended my hand to Hawthorne. Please have a seat, I invited, and we settled in. Homicide? I echoed. Hawthorne nodded, presenting a photograph. Katie's face was recognizable, but she appeared lifeless, her complexion unsettling. Can you confirm the identity of the woman in this photo? Hawthorne inquired. That looks like my wife, Katie, I confirmed, but she was alive early Sunday morning. I have a video. Did she have any distinguishing marks or tattoos? Hawthorne probed. Yes, a small dolphin tattoo on her upper right thigh, I recalled. She got it on a dare 15 years ago. Hawthorne glanced at Ryan and then back at me, his expression somber. I regret to inform you, Mr. West, but it appears that your wife may have been murdered, he stated. Murdered? I exclaimed. How? When? That's what we're investigating, Mr. West, Hawthorne replied. The coroner is still examining her, but the initial assessment suggests she died from a massive heart attack. But wouldn't that rule out murder? I questioned. Well, her body was discovered in a shallow grave in Central Park yesterday afternoon, Hawthorne disclosed. In my experience, such findings typically indicate foul play. We're awaiting toxicology results, which may provide more insight. What more can you tell us? I recounted the entire ordeal to them. Ryan took notes while listening attentively, though he had heard the details before. Retrieving my phone, I played the audio recording and then the video for them. Mom, overwhelmed, burst into tears and Dad ushered her out of the room, leaving me alone with the detectives. After they finished viewing the footage, I shared Brenda's account. They made notes and exchanged glances before addressing me. This clarifies the bruises and condition of Mrs. West's body, Hawthorne remarked. Turning to me, he continued, This woman, Harris, is she on duty today? To my knowledge, yes, I replied. We need to speak with her. Hawthorne directed at Ryan, who nodded in agreement. He then turned to me again. What do you know about the medication Henderson mentioned, the super ecstasy? He inquired. Not much beyond what Brenda told me and what I experienced, I admitted. The doctor mentioned that the substance they used on me had already left my system. Henderson and his associates, any insights there? Ryan pressed. Henderson's private jet departed from New York last night. According to the pilot's filed flight plan, they were returning here, but there's no record of the plane landing, I explained. Ryder has branches nationwide. He could be anywhere. Excellent, Hawthorne remarked, turning to Ryan. We'll need to involve the FAA and possibly the FBI. I have a contact at the local FAA office, Ryan offered. We can head there after executing a search warrant on Ryder. Hawthorne nodded in agreement. What's the next step? I inquired. If your accounts are accurate, this could escalate into a federal case since Henderson transported your wife across state lines, Ryan stated. We're considering multiple charges against him, including murder and potentially kidnapping. In the meantime, Hawthorne added, my team will continue their investigation and recover your wife's body. This process may take several days. We also plan to detain the individuals seen in the video for questioning. I nodded in acknowledgement. Ryan glanced at Hawthorne before addressing me. I'd like to speak with Mr. West privately if you don't mind, he requested. Hawthorne nodded at me. Of course. I'll step out to make a few calls. I'll be just outside, he said before exiting the room. Ryan glanced at me before proceeding. I sincerely apologize for all of this, Mr. West, he conveyed. Thank you, Detective, I responded, shaking his hand. After he departed, Ryan redirected his attention to me. Mr. West, Tom, he began. I wanted to have a private conversation with you regarding what transpired with your wife. I appreciate that, Ryan, I acknowledged. I'll spare you the graphic details, Ryan began. But based on what I've gathered, your wife's final 48 hours were utterly harrowing. I consulted with a medical examiner back east and he corroborated my suspicions. I don't believe your wife consented to what was done to her. I suspect she was subjected to a brutal assault. She was. Suffered and exploited by a group of power-hungry individuals. Look, Ryan, I understand your intentions, and I'm grateful, I responded. I truly do. But the reality is, Katie and Henderson were involved for about a month before this incident. I'm not entirely sure what transpired between them, but I have a fairly good idea. Katie could have put an end to all of this prior to last Friday, but she chose not to. I don't understand her actions, and now I never will. I understand, Ryan murmured. He retrieved a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. I suggest you consult with Dr. Harmon. She's highly reputable. Give her a call. All right, I'll do that. Thank you, I acknowledged. I'm concerned that Henderson's associates might return for you, he expressed. I would assign officers to protect you, but unfortunately our resources are limited. However, I'll instruct the dispatcher to increase patrols in your area. Do you want a firearm? No, I replied. He nodded. All right, he stated. In that case, always keep your doors and windows secured. If you suspect anything, dial emergency immediately. I'll remember that, Ryan, I assured him. Just then, Hawthorne re-entered the house. I just spoke with your partner, Johnson. He informed us Henderson is wanted nationwide, and we have search warrants ready to execute. Ryan nodded and stood up. We'll keep in touch, Tom, he said, shaking my hand. Hawthorne extended his hand. I offer my condolences for your loss, Mr. West, he conveyed. Thank you, Detective, I replied. After they departed, my parents returned and took a seat. Are you going to be all right, son? Dad inquired. I think so, Dad, I replied. I have a couple more calls to make, and I'm not particularly looking forward to them. In many ways, that's true. I needed to inform Jim about his mother's situation, and I also had to reach out to Katie's parents. Understood, Dad asked. Understood. If you need anything, just give us a call, all right? Dad reiterated. I'll do that, Dad. Thanks, I affirmed. We exchanged embraces, and I watched them depart. I dialed Jim's cell phone and left a message, anticipating it might take some time for him to return my call. The next call on my agenda was one I dreaded. Katie's father, retired Marine Colonel Bill Anderson, earned the moniker Bloody Bill for his heroic exploits in Afghanistan, allegedly dispatching multiple Taliban fighters with just a knife. His uniform boasted more ribbons and medals than I'd ever seen. He and Katie's mother, Alice, had settled in the country after his military service. I hesitated to break the news of Katie's death to the colonel, but we had a good rapport and he insisted I call him Dad. Summoning courage, I called him. Anderson Residence, he answered. It's me, Tom, I said. Are you okay? He asked, sensing my distress. Not really, Dad, I replied. Katie's dead. Shocked, he demanded details. After a brief explanation, he decided they'd visit at 4 p.m., adding a quip about civilian time. Got it, Dad, I chuckled, and I'll have coffee ready. With that, we hung up, and I sank into my chair, overwhelmed by grief. My world had crumbled, my marriage had faltered, and now Katie, the love of my life, was gone. Despite my disdain for her actions, I couldn't bear the thought of her passing away, unlike Henderson, who I viewed differently. I rose and indulged in my mom's comforting lasagna, a remedy that had always eased my troubles. Cleaning up afterward, I roamed the house. Each corner triggered memories of Katie and our life together. Realizing I couldn't remain in this house, I resolved to sell it once everything settled, opting for something smaller. Discovering Katie's phone on the nightstand, I unlocked it with her familiar 4-digit code. Annoyingly, it happened at that moment. Examining her call log, I noticed repeated calls from Henderson and Brenda's workplace, particularly on Friday morning. Scanning her messages, I found an exchange with Henderson from a few months back, lacking significant context. Perusing her emails, I found nothing incriminating. Turning off the phone, I placed it back on the nightstand. Checking the time, I realized it was already 3:45 p.m. I had no clue how much time I had spent on Katie's phone. Knowing the Colonel's punctuality, I headed to the kitchen and brewed fresh coffee, strong, just the way he preferred it. As the digital clock on the coffee pot struck 4 p.m., the doorbell chimed. I knew it was the Colonel, so I welcomed him and Alice inside. "Damn it, son, didn't anyone ever teach you to duck?" the Colonel exclaimed upon seeing my face. "My father tried, but I don't think I ever fully grasped it," I half-joked. "Come in." As they entered, another car pulled into the driveway. I observed a tall, lanky man stepping out and approaching the door. "I hope you don't mind," Bill mentioned. "After what you told me, I took the liberty of calling for reinforcements." By then, the tall man had entered the house, carrying a laptop bag and 2 more bags, leaving me wondering what was happening. Bill introduced him. "Ron, this is my brother-in-law, Tom West," he said. "Tom, meet Ron Wiseman. We served together in the Corps." "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wiseman," I greeted, shaking his hand. "Please call me Ron," he insisted. I glanced at the Colonel. "Ron and his wife have experience dealing with individuals like Henderson," the Colonel explained. "Plus, he possesses certain skills that could prove valuable." "What kind of skills?" I inquired. "I'm an accountant by profession," Ron disclosed. "An accountant?" I echoed. Ron grinned as he set his bags down. "Well, I'm a bit more than just that," he elaborated. "I'm involved with a special task force and have access to information that, as the Colonel mentioned, could be quite useful." "I see," I responded. "Well, please have a seat, and I'll fetch us some coffee." Alice joined me in the kitchen, and we returned with 4 large cups of coffee. Hot, fresh, black, and strong, just how the Colonel preferred it. Alice handed him his cup, and after a cautious sip, he remarked, "Not bad, Tom, thank you. Now, why don't you bring us all up to speed?" I recounted the events up until Ryan and Hawthorne left the house earlier. "You mentioned video recordings?" the Colonel inquired. "Yes," I confirmed. "They're quite disturbing." "I'd still like to see them," he insisted. "Don't worry, after 30 years in the Corps, there's not much that Alice and I haven't seen." I retrieved my phone and played the videos for them. They watched all 4 before I returned the phone. Bill and Alice seemed visibly upset, but Ron remained composed, pausing the videos at times to scrutinize the individuals involved. "It's evident she was medicated," Alice remarked. Bill and Ron nodded in agreement. "But with what exactly, I'm not certain," I admitted. "Brenda, Henderson's assistant, mentioned something about super ecstasy or the like." "And Henderson medicated you too?" Ron inquired. "Yes," I confirmed, but by the time I was treated at the hospital, it had already left my system. By then, Ron had set up his laptop and connected to the internet. "Those 2 thugs who attacked you," he continued. "Did you catch them on video?" "Yes," I replied. I opened one of the videos and paused it so Ron could examine it closely. "Those 2 big guys over there are Harvey Strauss and Lenny Jameson," I pointed out, indicating them in the footage. "Can you send me these videos?" Ron requested, providing his email address. "Certainly," I agreed. I forwarded the videos to him, and Ron confirmed receipt of the files and began analyzing them. "You know, those aren't their real names," Ron remarked. "No, I wasn't aware," I admitted. "What are their real identities?" "They're former criminals," Ron disclosed. "They disappeared after their boss, James Brolin, also known as Jimmy the Weasel, was found murdered in his own bed. The authorities have been searching for them for quite some time." "How long have they been working for Henderson?" "I believe it's been a couple of years now," I replied. "Why do you ask?" "They vanished around that time," Ron noted. "Are you suggesting they've made Henderson a wanted man across the nation?" "Exactly," Ron confirmed. "All right," he said, clicking his mouse. "Let's see what we can dig up." He continued working, letting his program run in the background. "So, here's the plan," the Colonel interjected. After discussing further, Ron agreed to remain with me until these individuals were neutralized. "I'm not comfortable with you being alone here while they're still out there," he expressed. "Ron, keep me posted as soon as you get any updates on them, all right?" the Colonel instructed. "I'll take it from there." "Understood, Colonel," Ron replied. "And what about you?" I inquired of Bill. "It's better if you're kept in the dark, son," he replied. "Let's just say Marines handle our own business and leave it at that. Don't worry, Henderson and his associates will face consequences one way or another." "You mentioned you're off until Monday due to illness?" he asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "What's your plan after this?" he probed. "I can't remain at Ryder after all this," I stated. "I've decided to resign, giving 2 weeks' notice starting Monday. Additionally, I'm considering selling this house and downsizing." "I can't blame you," he sympathized. "Any update on when Katie's body will be released?" "It could be several days, according to what Hawthorne told me," I relayed. "But if you need assistance with final arrangements, don't hesitate to ask," he offered. Thank you, Dad. I appreciate it, I expressed. Bill rose, signaling the end of the meeting. Alice and Ron followed suit. We should head out, dear, Bill addressed Alice. Ron, keep me informed of any developments. Will do, Ron assured. Bill turned to me and embraced me, a gesture that took me by surprise. In all my years knowing him, I had never seen him hug another man. Everything will work out, son, he reassured me. Alice stepped forward after he released me and embraced me gently. I'm truly sorry for what happened, Tom, she comforted. Don't worry about a thing, all right? I won't, Mom, I assured her. Thank you for coming. You're welcome, she responded. And with that, they departed. Shortly after their departure, my phone rang. Seeing it was Jim, I answered and sat down beside him to recount the events. At first, he was taken aback by the news. Dad, that just doesn't sound like something she could do, Jim remarked. I know, it doesn't make any sense to me either, I concurred. Are there any clues as to why she did this? He inquired. No, son. I checked her phone and email, but there's nothing there, I explained. Maybe she has a burner phone somewhere, he suggested. A burner phone? I questioned. Yeah, one of those disposable gadgets you toss away after using pay-as-you-go minutes, Jim clarified. Perhaps she has one hidden that you haven't found yet. My mind immediately shifted to the videos they sent me. They originated from a number I didn't recognize. Maybe it was her burner phone. If so, then no one could trace where she is now. You might be onto something, I acknowledged. I hadn't considered that. We conversed a bit more, and Jim concluded by asking me to inform him when his mother's body would be released for burial. After the call, I mentioned the burner phone theory to Ron. That makes sense, he agreed. If you have the number, I'll see what I can uncover. I provided him with the number, and he initiated another program to trace it. A few minutes later, he had his answer. This number corresponds to a phone purchased here in the city, he reported. As you suspected, it's a burner phone. The number is registered to Ryder and was last detected Tuesday morning in NYC. There hasn't been any activity on it since you received the last video. Any idea where he might be now? I inquired. None, he replied. As far as we know, it was disassembled and disposed of in the river. He returned to his computer, prompting me to prepare a guest room upstairs since I didn't know how long he'd stay. He remained until Saturday, spending much time on the computer. While unaware of his activities, we'd grown closer since his arrival on Wednesday. He disclosed being a Marine sniper, now working for a federal private task force. Despite his background as a CPA, most of his work involved research. He shared tidbits about his and his wife Amy's interactions with executives, which intrigued me. The previous night, he requested if Amy could join for the weekend, to which I agreed. She arrived Saturday morning, and after introductions, they retreated to the guest room. Giving them space, I occupied myself in the garage for about an hour before returning inside. Ron and Amy were engrossed in something on his computer when I joined. Any updates? I inquired. Yes, Ron affirmed. Firstly, the FBI has taken over the investigation. Secondly, about half an hour ago, I received a solid hit on our targets. All three? I queried. Yeah, they're near Colorado Springs, Ron confirmed. I've already notified the colonel. Then he'll handle it himself. There's something else. What is it? I inquired. I was able to access the official autopsy report on your wife, he disclosed. What does it say? I pressed. According to the report, your wife did indeed suffer a massive heart attack from the chemicals Henderson administered, Ron revealed. But that's not what ended her life. They discovered soil particles in her lungs. What does that mean? I asked, my voice faltering. It means she was still alive when they buried her, Ron stated grimly. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Barely alive, but alive nonetheless. I'm sorry, there's more. More, I exclaimed in disbelief. There was also extensive bruising around her private parts, Ron continued. And a toxicology report revealed significant levels of various chemicals in her bloodstream, including ecstasy and cocaine. I'm sorry, Tom, but it appears the last hours of her life were brutal. I couldn't believe she willingly participated in all of this. What do you think happened? I questioned. From what I've gathered, Henderson and his cohorts likely had quite a wild party, he speculated. Your wife was so under the influence of what Henderson gave her that she lost control. At some point, she suffered a heart attack. Instead of seeking medical help, they likely presumed she was deceased, so they disposed of her by burying her. I sank into a chair, stunned by Ron's revelations. Amy approached and embraced me as tears streamed down my face. Henderson and his accomplices are wanted for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, the production and distribution of various controlled substances, and racketeering among other charges, Ron disclosed. The other individuals in your videos have already been apprehended and charged, but Henderson is the primary target. What do you think his fate will be? I inquired. Ron shrugged. Who can say, he replied. One can only speculate about the workings of the courts these days. The next morning, I was awakened by my phone ringing. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 4:30 a.m. I wondered who could be calling at such an hour. Answering, I heard a masked voice. Check your text messages, it instructed before hanging up. Opening the message, I found a video attached. In it, 3 naked bound men were dumped in front of a brick building. Recognizing them as Henderson, Lenny, and Harvey, I watched as a sign was hung around Henderson's neck, confessing to Katie West's murder. I pondered if the FBI would get involved. Finishing the video, I returned to sleep. 4 hours later, I descended to find Amy cooking breakfast in the kitchen. I hope you don't mind me trying my hand in your kitchen, she said. Ron gets cranky without his morning bacon. Not at all, I replied. I get a little cranky myself without bacon. Help yourself. After she finished, we all sat down to eat. As we finished, there was a knock at the door. Opening it, I found Ryan standing there. May I come in, he asked. Of course, I replied, ushering him in. Introducing him to Ron and Amy as friends of my father-in-law, I offered him coffee. No, I won't stay long, he declined. I just wanted to inform you that Henderson and 2 of his top accomplices were apprehended in Colorado Springs early this morning. That's good news, right? I inquired. Yes, he confirmed. They're talking. There are some questions about the circumstances of their capture, but I assume you're not privy to that. No, I'm not, I asserted. I've been here all night. Ron and Amy can vouch for that. Uh-huh, he responded. Well, I just wanted to keep you informed. Now I'll leave you to it. Take care of yourself. Thanks, Ryan, I expressed as he departed. Turning to Ron, I posed a question. You don't happen to know anything about this, do you? Don't ask and I won't fib, he replied with a knowing grin. I still suggest giving your father-in-law a call to express gratitude. Nodding in agreement, I retrieved my phone. Anderson, Bill greeted upon answering. Dad, just wanted to inform you that the police paid me a visit, I relayed. Henderson and his cohort were apprehended in Colorado Springs. Well, that's a relief, he responded. Ron advised me to extend my thanks, I added. Did he indeed? Bill inquired. Yes, I confirmed. So I wanted to express my appreciation. You're welcome, son, he replied warmly. I heard you received a call last night. That's correct, I affirmed. That sign was quite the touch. Do you think it gave them a lead? His grin indicated agreement. I sure hope so, he said. We'll catch up soon, son. Take care of yourself. I will, Dad, I assured. Thank you. The next Monday, I resigned from work, receiving understanding but regretful farewells. Then I visited a realtor to initiate the process of selling our longtime home, bracing myself for the emotional and logistical challenges. A week later, Katie's body was released by the New York medical examiner as her parents arranged her funeral. Despite conflicting emotions, I attended mainly to support Bill and Alice, who had been kind to me during this ordeal. Jim managed to take a break from West Point to join me at the funeral, where we shared memories and mourned together. I chose not to divulge Katie's actions to him, wanting to preserve his fond memories of her. Following the funeral, I consulted with a lawyer about potentially suing Ryder, as there seemed to be a strong case against Henderson and the board of directors, given their legal troubles. The trial against Henderson and the involved board members felt endless. The U.S. attorney pursued the death penalty for Henderson, while the defense filed numerous motions. I testified about my own experience and listened to others' testimonies. Brenda also testified, revealing that Katie wasn't the only victim of Henderson's medication and exploitation. When questioned, Brenda admitted uncertainty about whether Katie and Henderson had an affair before the incident. Video evidence suggested Katie initially rejected Henderson's advances, but later seemed to consider them. Searches of Henderson's office and home uncovered evidence of medication experimentation. Expert witnesses confirmed that many of the compounds he created were likely intended as date rape drugs. During the trial, I finally got the full story of what happened to Katie. It turned out that Henderson had kept her alive over the weekend with drugs and alcohol. At some point during their festivities, she experienced severe chest pain and collapsed, unconscious. The men claimed they checked her but couldn't find a pulse. Instead of seeking immediate medical help, which was nearby, they assumed she was dead. After cleaning her up a bit, they placed her in a car trunk and buried her in Central Park. Under questioning by the U.S. attorney, none of them admitted to having CPR training or medical qualifications. Their fate was sealed when a medical examiner found soil in her lungs matching that of the burial site, indicating she was buried alive. Some jury members visibly reacted to this revelation. At the trial's conclusion, Jake, his 2 accomplices, and everyone involved in the weekend were found guilty on all charges. The judge opted against the death penalty, sentencing Jake to life in prison, along with Lenny and Harvey. Others received slightly lighter prison terms. Civil lawsuits against Ryder and Henderson followed the criminal trial. The company lost most of its customers and went into receivership. Henderson, after paying a substantial sum, filed for bankruptcy. The fallout from Henderson's scheme to betray me was far-reaching. Katie was dead, and he and his cohorts were bankrupt and imprisoned. The company vanished, leaving hundreds unemployed. As for me, life moved forward. I sold the house and bought a 2-bedroom apartment. Closing the door on the house for the last time was bittersweet. However, I had my whole life ahead of me. My advisor suggested taking some time off, maybe a cruise to meet someone new. So, I booked a round-the-world cruise and headed to the airport, excited for the adventures that lay ahead. I asked my husband for an open marriage, he refused, so I cheated and now I deeply regret it. Tom worked diligently on fresh test data, a monotonous and lengthy task that was crucial to his team's recent efforts on the test car. Despite his lack of enthusiasm, he diligently organized the information for analysis. His phone chimed with a text alert. Glancing at the screen, he momentarily ignored the sender's identity. Only after a lull in his data work did he glance up from his monitor, retrieving his phone to inspect the message. It hailed from an unregistered number, though local in area code, unfamiliar to him. Initially deeming it potential spam, he reconsidered, opting to open it in case it originated from a team member whose contact he hadn't yet saved. Clicking on the message revealed an unexpected sight, a carnally explicit photo. Bewildered, he read the accompanying message. Pay close attention. You still have time. At Bradley's. 18. Ouch. He reviewed the message once more, pausing for a moment. He then let out a slight chuckle. It wasn't common for them to receive misdirected solicitations, and he was about to discard the message when he glanced at the image once more, causing his heart to skip a beat. Initially unnoticed on her left leg, so minuscule it was nearly imperceptible, was a tiny mole belonging to Alice, his wife of 6 years. Staring at her in disbelief, he desperately sought something to refute what he had witnessed firsthand. Yet the more he scrutinized, the more convinced he became that he was indeed beholding a damning photograph of his spouse. Rereading the message, he puzzled over its significance. Bradley's was a local pub, but not one frequented by Alice. He was in the neighboring town, so why Bradley's at 6 in the evening while Alice should have been en route to Boston? Her team was gearing up for a significant proposal. The presentation loomed for Monday afternoon. The entire team had flown in today, slated to convene tomorrow for final proposal touches, and on Sunday for a comprehensive rehearsal before the actual event. As one of the leaders, Alice's presence was essential for preparation. It was currently 5:15 p.m. Her arrival in Boston was scheduled for 4:30. Normally, she'd check in upon landing, but it seemed plausible she was occupied assembling the team and their gear en route to the hotel. He contemplated phoning, but opted to address the message first. Nothing original, but entirely expected. "Who is this and where did you get this photo?" he typed out. "Should I meet you at Bradley's?" Packing his belongings for the day, he resolved to head to Bradley's for answers. He needed to hear from Alice about the flight, so he sent her a casual, "How did the flight go? I'm grabbing a bite. Call me when you're free." He planned to maintain a low profile and unravel the situation. As he strolled to his car, his phone beeped again. Alice, he presumed. Unlocking his phone, but the message came from the mysterious sender. "I'll be there, but I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me." His head reeled. Quickly, he launched the Maps app on his phone and hastened to his car. It took him 30 minutes to reach Bradley's, and it was now 5:40 p.m. He would arrive shortly after 6, unaware of the urgency. He planned to head straight there, hoping to make it in time for whoever the sender of the message thought would interest him. En route, his phone rang again. This time it was Alice, mentioning the hectic time with her team. "I'll call you later before bed. Love you." He didn't think much of it. Their conversation could wait. His focus was on the meeting at Bradley's and how the sender obtained such personal information about his wife. His heart raced as he pulled into the parking lot at 6:12 p.m. The sender hadn't hinted at whom he was seeking, so he assumed whoever wanted to meet him knew him and would reach out. However, it was the suggestion of someone more captivating being present that troubled him the most. The message's sender possessed knowledge he lacked, leaving him feeling like he was being manipulated. Yet he couldn't think of another way to unravel the mystery. Inside, he was in turmoil over the photograph. He had complete trust in her, and their bed life seemed satisfying, or so he believed. However, there was only one means for someone to acquire his wife's photo, and he was about to discover it in roughly 5 minutes. The prospect of this revelation filled him with dread. Stepping into the dimly lit pub, he scanned the unfamiliar surroundings, uncertain of its layout. Ahead lay a spacious dining area, while to the left stood a bar. Choosing a seat at the bar's end, he signaled the bartender, who had just finished serving a well-dressed patron, to take his order. He requested a draft and turned his gaze toward the dining room. A man, having placed his order, traversed the floor, heading toward a table occupied by cheerful individuals. And then he spotted what the message had hinted at. Alice sat at the table, graciously accepting a drink from a sharply dressed man, exuding charm in her little black dress and pearls. Meanwhile, Tom operated on autopilot. Approaching the table, he closed the distance to Alice, who, upon spotting him, transformed her open smile into a startled expression. Undeterred, Tom continued his stride, seizing the well-dressed man's hair with his left hand, yanking it back forcefully. The man dropped his drink and stumbled backward, crying out in pain as Tom pulled him past. Releasing his grip, Tom poised for a right punch, only to realize the man had retreated too swiftly, falling onto his rear before Tom could engage. "Don't bother getting up, Pete," Tom cautioned. Pete, now disheveled and drenched in spilled drinks, nodded silently, making no attempt to move or speak. Returning his gaze, Tom observed the table's solemn silence. Recognizing familiar faces, members of Alice's team, who often gathered at their home, he pondered the peculiar loyalty to the team amidst betrayal. Except for one individual, someone present knew the truth and chose to divulge it. Briefly considering uncovering the informant's identity, he swiftly dismissed the idea as unworthy of pursuit. "I'm heading home. If there's any hope of salvaging our marriage, you'll come home now," he declared. Agreeing, she began to rise, but he motioned for her to pause. "Give me a moment to depart," he requested. Before leaving, he directed his attention to Betty Wilson, seated beside Bob Thorin. "Betty, Bill thinks you're in Boston too." "Bob, is this what Hannah believes?" Their avoidance of eye contact and silence spoke volumes. "Is the entire team involved with each other?" he pondered. Regrettably, he knew that at least one of them was. The journey home was mechanical, and he was surprised to find himself in his driveway. Entering the house, he retrieved a beer from the refrigerator and settled into the living room. While familiar with Bill Wilson and Hannah Thorin, he didn't recognize the other two couples among the four present. Debating whether to contact Bob or Hannah, he realized he had little desire to engage in conversation and lacked pertinent information. However, considering Betty and Bob's deceit and the situation's gravity, he opted to send them a message. "Just heard from Alice. The team's travel plans seemed to have changed. Best call for updates." Now they were aware of a disruption and could choose whether to delve deeper. At least his conscience was clear. After about 20 minutes, he heard the garage door open, signaling Alice's arrival. Waiting in the living room, he watched as she entered, still clad in her little black dress but minus her shoes and jewelry. Despite her composed demeanor, he sensed her readiness to speak. As she settled onto the sofa opposite him, remaining silent, he believed in the potency of silence in discussions, prepared to let it linger as long as necessary. But it didn't last long. Alice appeared on the verge of bursting. "It's not what you think," she began, only to be halted by his raised hand. "You have no clue what I think about what I witnessed tonight," Tom retorted. "I don't need a lengthy explanation. We're both engineers. We know there's no definitive answer to any question. Why is just a way to rationalize subpar outcomes, so I won't bother asking why. Let's start with something else. How much time, how many people, how frequently? Do our acquaintances know about this apart from those at the table? Am I labeled as your betrayed man among our colleagues and friends?" "No, Tom, it's not like that," Alice countered. "We're a team. Our travel plans got disrupted, and instead of returning home and traveling again tomorrow, Pete suggested we stay in town to rest before the job starts. I didn't see the entire team." Where was everyone else?" "Some decided to stay home an extra night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to deceive me," he accused. "You seemed quite close to Pete. Is there something between the star engineer and the Prodigy program manager that I should know about?" "Well, for starters, Pete is okay. And he persuaded Bradley's owners not to press charges," she stated, sounding positive. His eyes widened in sheer astonishment at her loyalty. "I couldn't care less about your boyfriend. If that fool hadn't stumbled, I would have given him a broken nose. And by the way, the verdict's still out," Tom remarked. "Let him press charges. I've already spent a night in jail. It doesn't intimidate me." "Fair point. This could serve as compelling evidence," she said, flashing a half-smile. "Do you love him?" Alice fell silent, briefly gathering her thoughts. "Yes." Her admission hung in the air, and silence once again filled the conversation, signaling potential trouble ahead. "He's not my boyfriend. Nothing at all happened. Yes, I should have informed you about the change in travel plans, but it seemed insignificant. Whether I was in town or in Boston, it made no difference. You weren't expecting me, and I was still committed to the team. All we did was have dinner before retiring to our rooms. There was no reason for you to react as you did. He merely brought drinks. You completely humiliated me in front of my team." Now in full defensive mode, she attempted to maintain composure and feign indifference. He retrieved his phone, brought up the message, and slid it across the coffee table to her. Judging by her expression, he knew she recalled the photo and the circumstances. Realizing denial was futile, without further delay, she began again. He picked up his phone, activated the voice recording app, and placed the phone in his shirt pocket. "Tom, our team," she hesitated, searching for words. "We're very close-knit in many respects. Most of us," she continued. We have a small group that meets regularly. Bradley hosted us all. We were the ones shouldering the majority of the concerns and proposal preparation. You know how much time I invested in our proposal. I can't pinpoint when it began. It was some time after Pete assumed leadership. We collaborated closely and I was drawn to him, and it just happened, Alice confessed. Intentionality, he interjected. Lovemaking isn't spontaneous. First, you undress. There are numerous conscious choices involved. We both understand that, so please spare me. So nearly 6 months, he answered his own query. That's when Pete secured the contract, correct? She nodded. Team, he resumed. All of you. He refrained from labeling the notion. I mean, are you all involved? She nodded once more. Yes, Pete believed it fostered trust and team cohesion. Is that how he persuaded everyone to initiate a company? Lovemaking team? Now you're being disrespectful. It's much deeper than that. I feel deeply connected to Pete and my team more than ever, Alice's confidence surged. He sensed trouble brewing. Unfortunately, you'll witness some personnel changes in your team, Tom stated. What have you done? Alice gasped. Tom, if you tell anyone else, it'll cause further injury. Let them decide for themselves. We must accept it, Alice. I can't stay silent and be complicit. I favor Bob and Hannah, actually. I prefer them over Betty and Bill, he remarked. I informed them that my travel plans appear to have shifted. How your friends respond to their spouses, and how their spouses accept these responses, is their choice. I can rest peacefully with my decision. Tom, we boast the most productive team in CR Inc. history, she almost shouted at him. And you benefited too, sir. Just because we held team meetings on Wednesdays doesn't mean you missed out. I never excluded you. You always had access whenever you needed it. So I was socializing with my team earlier, and you were unaware. Do you want to discuss that photo you showed me? She taunted. So now, just because you know, and just because your ego is bruised, you want to diminish everything my team and I have accomplished, Alice hissed, growing angrier by the moment. It excited me. Tom's heart rate surged as Alice continued to defend her team's actions, and he briefly entertained the thought of forgiving her during the ride home from Bradley's. If this was just a one-time thing with Pete, that notion had long since perished. He didn't need to hear anymore. He didn't want to hear anymore, but she persisted. No, sir, we won't let you off the hook. You should text Bob and Hannah to let them know you heard from me. We're stuck in Atlanta but have flights booked for tomorrow morning. That's the story Betty and Bill will stick to, and you'll support them. Got it? She yelled. There's millions at stake in this deal, and your complaints mean nothing. Send the message, then we'll discuss our next steps. What next? Tom yelled back. There is no next. Are you leaving now? You, your messed up team, and your leader Pete can carry on however you want. We're finished. I'll find a lawyer this week and settle everything. It's a straightforward 50-50th split. You keep your pension, I keep mine, Tom declared. Go. You have reservations in the city. Use them. Head to Boston and chalk up another big win for you and your team. Tom, please, send those messages, Alice pleaded, her tone much softer now. If we lose Betty or Bill before the presentation, the company could lose millions, both for you and me. We could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just think of the possibilities with that money. Just us. Forget about this misunderstanding, please, Tom. Don't let baseless concerns about casual lovemaking ruin everything. Pete says I'm on track for CEO status. I just need to keep doing what we're doing for a few more years. Don't you want that for me, for us? Alice implored. Just leave, he barely managed to utter. A word before a forceful blow struck his back, knocking the wind out of him, leaving him sprawled on the floor with a knee pressed into his back. Don't injure him, Alice interjected. At least not too much, she added. So the jury's still out on whether my nose was broken, huh? Pete remarked, leaning in beside me as I lay pinned. Tom suspected there must be a transmitter. Now I know whose side she's on. Let's see whose nose ends up broken, Pete grinned. Grab his damn phone and send these damn texts for him. We don't have time for this nonsense, someone instructed, hoisting him from the floor. Only one person. Tom feigned offense, causing the person behind him to exert considerable effort to lift him, providing valuable insight. His adversary was a weak office type, wheezing from the exertion of lifting Tom to his feet. After being used as a punching bag, Tom caught his breath and returned to the fray. Unlike Pete and his team of polished salesmen, Tom's team operated in the field with the 160th SOAR Detachment from Fort Campbell, California. Though they weren't on the same level, after working alongside the crews on test missions, they were invited to support the Pillsbury trials under the tutelage of seasoned veterans who piloted aircrafts modified by Tom's team, specifically for their needs. If these individuals showed up at your door, it signaled the end of your days on Earth. Tom and his team developed the equipment necessary to enter hotspots and, crucially, to extricate themselves from them. They took pride in their contributions, ensuring mission success and the safe return of all personnel. The members of the 160th and their formidable passengers deeply appreciated the hard work Tom's team invested in making their gear operational. Among them, Staff Sergeant Troy Baker was the most intimidating figure. Renowned throughout his sphere, from vagrants to colonels, everyone accorded him the respect he earned by accompanying his men on missions worldwide. He was renowned for his steadfast commitment to never leaving anyone behind, a reputation solidified during the Columbia mission. Staff Sergeant Baker instructed the young lieutenant platoon leader to stick close. It was the lieutenant's maiden mission, and Staff Sergeant Baker thought he was handling it well for a rookie. When FARC rebels initiated gunfire and ambushed their team, they managed to fend them off. However, when he glanced back, he saw the lieutenant sprawled on the ground, bleeding from a head wound. "He's lost consciousness," the medic noted, assessing his vital signs. Baker knelt down, lifting him onto the fireman's carry. "Yoon's gone," the doctor reiterated. "Perhaps," Baker replied, "but he's still coming home with us." The medic regarded him as though he'd lost his mind. "We've got over 5 TRs back to the landing site through thick forest. We'll be lucky to make it back in one piece, but hauling a dead guy? What's this guy thinking?" The seasoned sergeant intercepted his thoughts. "I'd do the same for you, Billy," he assured the medic. "Stay close in case I need you." Their exploits became legendary upon their return to base. As the helicopter touched down, the doctor awaited them. The medic informed the doctor of the lieutenant's condition. Nodding, the doctor extracted a flashlight with a pen from his pocket. The medic watched in astonishment as the dead lieutenant's pupils contracted under the beam of light. "Care to reconsider your diagnosis, doctor?" the doc queried, hustling the revived lieutenant to the operating room. He was one of those timeless figures. He didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. He was irreplaceable. In an age of mass production and disposability, he stood apart. He was crafted by hand, unique, and Tom and his team held a particular fascination with him. During the prolonged downtime between missions, the staff sergeant expressed his gratitude by imparting basic yet effective hand-to-hand combat techniques to Tom and the team. He advised the engineers to be prepared for unexpected situations. "I understand the biggest challenge you'll likely encounter is a jammed copier or a painful paper cut, but if you continue in this field, you might find yourself in interesting places. So, if you ever happen to encounter the local inhabitants, you'll have some useful knowledge," Staff Sergeant Baker shared with the group. "Let's hope that a paper cut remains the worst obstacle you'll ever face." Tom regulated his breathing, subtly leaning against his captor to feign compliance. Recalling the combat techniques demonstrated by the senior sergeant, Tom reflected, "You might find yourself in situations where you can't do much but endure the blows. It's not ideal, but it happens. The key is to remember that even when you're struck, you still have the ability to fight back. You just need to outsmart your opponent." Tom applied this lesson, passive resistance, sapping the strength of his solitary captor. "Give me the phone, Tom," Pete demanded, locking eyes with him. "Now that you know about my affair with your wife, you're just another feeble geek. Do as we say, and maybe you can still be with Alice when the team doesn't need her. Don't forget, the luxury is her bonus can afford you. Perhaps Alice will even buy you a synthetic companion for those lonely moments." Tom remained silent as Pete relished humiliating him by coercing compliance. "Where is it, Tom?" he inquired, noticing the outline of a phone in Tom's shirt pocket. "Ah, found it." He reached for it with his right hand. Tom forcefully withdrew his right heel, striking his captor's shin midway and pulling it down until it collided with his Gucci moccasin-clad toes. Flexing his arms, he broke free from the grip of his captor, eliciting a cry of pain as the captor tumbled beneath his weight, unable to support himself. Pete's eyes widened in recognition as Tom swiftly extended his right hand, executing a shoulder turn as the first sergeant had taught him, and delivered a powerful punch to the center of Pete's face with maximum force. Feeling a bone fracture beneath his fist, a geyser of blood spurted from Pete's nose as he crumpled to the ground, as if struck by an axe. Turning to identify his assailant, Tom discovered it was Bill, lying on the floor, clutching his leg and whimpering. "I think you broke my leg." Tom forcefully stomped on Bill's foot, eliciting another cry of pain. "That should erase any doubt," Tom retorted, pivoting to face Pete, who was attempting to rise to his knees, hands raised to his injured face. Leaning close, Tom whispered in Pete's ear, "Looks like you've got a broken nose, Pete, but I'm not willing to sacrifice for the team just yet," before delivering a firm blow to Pete's temple, causing him to slump back down. Adrenaline coursing through his veins, Tom scanned the living room for Alice. Suddenly, he felt a sharp blow to the middle of his back and the base of his neck, causing him to drop to one knee. Turning to confront the attack, he spotted Alice wielding a cast-iron frying pan. Her swing missed its mark, grazing Tom's side. Rising to his feet, Tom seized the frying pan. "Tom, we can still salvage this," Alice pleaded. "Think of the money you'll lose." "I'll put an end to this extramarital affair. I'll stop them, I promise. Just you and me, like old times." Rubbing the back of his head with his left hand, he gazed at her, astonished by how swiftly she was metamorphosing from one version of Alice to another. For a moment, he likened her transformation to the alien creature in John Carpenter's The Thing, adapting to each new situation. He chuckled at the analogy. Interpreting his smile as tacit approval of her final plea, Alice approached Tom for a hug. He lowered his left hand from his neck to steady her. Then, after a brief pause, he raised his right hand and delivered a punch to her nose, not hard enough to render her unconscious, but sufficient to fracture a bone. Alice screamed and crumpled to the floor. "Doesn't it hurt?" Tom inquired. "Your eyes are watering, you can't see or breathe properly, and there's blood everywhere." "It's quite effective," he remarked. "Why did you slap me?" Alice cried out. "Because I could," he retorted. His phone remained on, recording the events. Although not all the recordings favored him, he believed he had enough evidence to justify his actions. Recalling the advice of the staff sergeant, he surveyed the room, decide when to act, and wait until the moment is right. But when you do act, do so decisively and persist until you're the only one left moving. He remembered. Except for Bill whimpering in the corner and Alice attempting to staunch the flow of blood from her nose, he was the only one in motion. "You've saved another ace," he thought. "Doesn't quite fit your profile, lover boy, and Mr. Bill will be fit for duty by Monday." "Such rotten luck, missing out on those millions and hefty bonuses," Tom mused aloud. "I wonder what Art will have to say about all this," he pondered, contemplating calling emergency services. He hesitated, realizing that involving the police would preclude his opportunity to interrogate Alice. He approached her, where she sat with a dish towel pressed to her face. Kneeling beside her, Tom demonstrated how to pinch the bridge of her nose with her thumb and index finger. The rush of adrenaline waned, leaving him drained, and he slumped heavily into the chair across from Alice. Where did my wife go? The Alice he encountered daily seemed vastly different from the woman sitting before him, prompting him to ponder how thoroughly she had deceived him. "Was it worth it?" he inquired. Alice glanced at him and shook her head. "It could have been," she replied. "If only you'd agree. We were on the verge. After Monday, I'd be on my way to the executive suite. This setback will delay everything. I can rectify it, but it's a setback." "So becoming vice president was your ultimate dream?" Tom queried. "Or what about us? Deception, lies, will this persist?" "Tom, you're so naive. Pete saw this. He warned me that your rigid ethics and Boy Scout mentality would hinder my progress if I allowed them to. He urged me to break free from your influence and forge my own path to success." "Did he advise you before or after he took advantage of you?" Tom retorted. "You don't know the half of it," she spat. "I tried to adhere to your advice like a dutiful engineer, thinking it would enhance my career." "You want to know what really works?" Tom remained silent. "Sometimes when someone's about to self-destruct, you just have to step aside," he continued, recording. "Let me tell you, my dear husband, all your counsel didn't amount to much. I went above and beyond to ensure my assignments were completed punctually and within budget, only to receive a few "well done, girl." It wasn't until Betty pulled me aside that I discovered what a woman truly needs to do to succeed. Believe me, leveraging lovemaking to climb the ladder works, and it's a whole lot easier and more enjoyable, she asserted. "So this happened before Peter came into the picture?" Tom queried. "Oh, for a clever engineer, you sure can be dense sometimes, Tom," she quipped. "It was at a Christmas party, a year after I joined CR, when I first surrendered to Art and never looked back." "Wait, you're also sleeping with the boss, Art? Art Vand?" Tom exclaimed. "Yes, Tom, Art, Pete, Bill, and anyone else on the team who can advance my career. Even now, if you think you've covered all bases, we informed Art of our whereabouts when we headed here. Now he's rallying the rest of the team. They'll receive a fabricated story about our absence. They'll have to proceed without us, but I believe the extra effort we invested with their procurement managers will yield dividends." "Do I really want to hear this?" he pondered. What the heck, why not?" "Extra effort," Tom encouraged. "You've always been proactive, Alice." "It was so effortless that I hesitate to even call it effort," she chuckled. "Reminds me of that old joke, you know. The worst lovemaking I ever had was still pretty good," she remarked. "At the Bitter Conference, it was smooth sailing with the men, so we had to get a bit more creative with Brenda, the standout woman on the selection committee. It's amusing that I can even seduce a woman, but I had to enlist old Pete for a boost. and considering the assurances that we begin collaborating after sealing the deal, our selection committee appears flawless," she remarked. "Then why all this? I mean, if everything's in a haze, why resort to such aggressive tactics?" Tom inquired. "It was Pete's notion, foolish. I urged him to relax, assured him I'd return home, pacify you, and make it back in time for the flight. But he insisted on asserting dominance. Look where it's landed us. Instead of being the face of the winning team, I'm here with you. As I said, it's salvageable, but it'll set me back." "You don't come so cheap," he countered. "Perhaps not," Alice acknowledged, "but I'd still soar." "Well, you certainly won't be flying now," he retorted. Recalling Pete's apparent knowledge, he suspected Alice had a transmitter. "Art, are you listening? I'll contact the authorities. I'm certain multiple felonies are involved, not to mention potential fraud." "This is a federal contract, right?" Tom posited rhetorically. "Yes. The feds aren't exactly lenient with what you call extra efforts. I'm sure you've got top-notch attorneys and all that, but perhaps there's an alternative," he hinted, leaving it at that. Moments later, Alice's phone rang with the tune of "Hail to the Chief." "Art," she answered, putting it on speaker. Art's voice filled the room. "Firstly, let me offer my apologies. Pete's actions were a blunder. I can assure you the board will address it firmly." "Thank you, Art." Tom felt a weight lift. "It's reassuring to see you and the board take assault and fraud seriously." "Tom, these are grave allegations. Lawyers will profit, but nobody wants to disrupt the status quo. We can pay the fines, Pete and Bill can do community service, but ultimately, you'll end up divorced and half as wealthy," Art explained matter-of-factly. "Is there an or in this scenario, Art?" Tom queried. "Alice always claimed you were the sharper of the two, yet I'm increasingly grateful I brought Alice aboard." "Indeed, Tom, there's certainly an or here," Art confirmed. "We supplanted you and your wife's affections, and when you confronted the issue, the response was utterly shameless, appalling." Tom grasped the situation. "Tom," Art continued, "instead of involving law enforcement as you suggested, we could reach a resolution. I've just sent a photo to Alice's phone, well, not myself, but one of my technicians. They assured me it vanishes post-viewing. Take a look. Perhaps this will mend some fences." Alice presented the image to Tom. It displayed Bank of Grand Cayman and a figure with numerous zeros. "And when will this come into play?" Tom inquired. "It's already in play, Tom. You've received an email with your account details. It's been a rough day for you, Tom. I understand if emotions cloud your judgment. Alice is deceitful, no doubt, but feelings don't count at the bank, correct?" "They just don't," Tom concurred, mimicking Art's tone. "CR will cover your divorce expenses. Reconciliation is off the table. It's evident Alice will pursue her share. She'll claim her personal effects and pension," he pondered momentarily before responding. On one hand, he could take a moral stance, expose the entire unsavory affair, and let the chips fall where they may. On the other, he could simply walk away. Art had just given him 5 million reasons to consider the latter. "Does CR have medical staff, Art?" Tom inquired. "Oh, certainly, Tom. We've got a few doctors on hand," Art responded. "All right," said Tom. "Better get a couple of them into the limo and send them over here for your team." "So, we're in agreement?" Art sought confirmation. "Regarding Alice?" Tom clarified. "Precisely," Art concurred. "Is that all?" Tom. "Farewell, Art," Tom stated, concluding the conversation. Tom retrieved his phone, deactivated the recording app, and returned it to his pocket. "I knew you'd see things our way, Tom. We can still be pals, maybe with benefits once this is all over," she suggested, flashing what she thought was her most charming smile. But even her bright grin couldn't mask the impact of her battered nose. Her eyes darkened, blood crusted beneath her nostrils, and dry droplets hung from her chin. Tom found the scene almost amusing and allowed himself a smile. Once again, Alice misunderstood his expression as agreement and leaned in for a kiss. Tom extended his right hand to halt her, then grasped her face and pushed her back until she crashed onto the sofa. "Either I slapped you too hard or not hard enough. Why would I ever want to kiss you, Alice?" She looked up at him, offended. "Take whatever you want, but don't be here tomorrow," Tom instructed, heading for the door. He paused beside Bill. "Still hurting, huh?" he asked. "Yeah, damn it, you idiot, it's still eliminating me," Bill complained. "Maybe this will take your mind off it," Tom remarked, delivering a swift kick to Bill's groin. Bill doubled over, groaning in pain. Tom got into his car, unsure of his destination, but food and shelter were high on his list of priorities. With that in mind, he grabbed a burger at a nearby cafe and checked into the Red Roof Inn just outside the city near the highway, falling asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite enduring the residual soreness from countless, well, at least 100, assorted injuries inflicted upon his body, he rose early in the morning and reluctantly hauled his aching frame out of bed. While brewing coffee in his motel room, his phone chimed, prompting him to reach for it. It was a message from that familiar number. Without delay, he opened it. "Apologies for yesterday. Let's meet at the mall around noon. I'll be waiting for you at the bar," the message read. He composed a reply and poured tepid brown liquid from the coffee maker carafe into a paper cup. "Yes, I'll be there," he mused, setting up his laptop. It was time to delve into online banking. Back in college, long before encountering Alice, Tom had a professor in economics who advocated for having at least one offshore account as a safety net. With nothing to lose and with the professor's guidance, he swiftly acquired a brand new bank account in the Cayman Islands. He dubbed it his Love You Foundation. Opening the account a decade ago, he diligently contributed whenever possible, amassing around $50,000 in savings. Now, his Love You Foundation was about to receive a significant injection. Tom logged into each bank's secure website with practiced ease, executing transfers from CR's payment into his personal account. He retained $100,000 in the original account. After showering and changing into fresh attire, he readied himself to rendezvous with the enigmatic sender of the message. Arriving just after noon, he spotted a man who gestured in his direction. Around his age, the man appeared suave and well-groomed. Tom approached him. "I believe you messaged me," he stated, taking a seat. "I regret how things unfolded." "Finding the right way to tell you wasn't easy," the stranger began. "Why don't you introduce yourself and explain your connection to Alice?" Tom countered. "I used to be on her team. After 8 years in the Army, I left due to injuries sustained in battle. Kay hired me about 6 months ago, and I joined Pete's team 3 months back. Mentioned working for Alice to a friend, and when he asked for her full name, we discovered a mutual friend. He asked me to watch out for Alice as a favor. Initially, everything was fine. I was warmly welcomed by the team, though the reasons weren't immediately clear," he explained. "Around 2 months later, Alice approached me. She's attractive and, well, persuasive. But when I inquired about the ring, she simply smiled and said, 'It's okay with you.' I didn't agree and made that clear. That's when things turned cold. I started getting the worst assignments and nothing but grief from Pete. I reached out to our mutual friend again, informing him of Alice's advances. He suspected there was more to the story and felt you should know. Pete sent me a photo of them attempting to entice me onto the team with a reward if I accepted. Let's just say I don't approve of their tactics. I consider myself honest. I quit yesterday and reached out to you," he disclosed. Our friend mentioned Tom, Troy Baker. "If it weren't for Troy," he replied, pausing briefly before continuing. "Let's just say he bailed me out of a tight spot when I was a rookie lieutenant. I owe him a few favors." "We both do," Tom concurred. "What's your plan?" the stranger inquired. "Art pretty much laid it out for me. I could involve the authorities, and yes, Bill, Pete, and even Alice would face legal repercussions. But with his legal team, it would likely end in nothing. We reached an agreement. You might view this as a compromise, and perhaps to some degree you're correct. But they took the only thing I couldn't replace. If I can't hold them legally accountable, I'll find another way to make them pay. It won't bring Alice back, but I may realize she's less indispensable than I believed. I've got a trip planned. Please pass on my gratitude to Troy for everything. I won't be returning to work," he stated. "And you?" Tom inquired. "Well, Troy always praises Baxter Inc. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer. You'll find they have a different approach at Baxter. You might prefer it. The work is challenging, but the perks don't compare to what Tony's team offered," he explained. Tom grinned. "I think I can accept that." The stranger rose, and Tom followed suit. They exchanged a simple nod and departed without further words. Come Monday, Tom was at the airport, checking in for a flight to Costa Rica. Tamarindo seemed like a good place to unwind. Making his way toward security, he spotted a mailbox, retrieving an envelope from his pocket addressed to the U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. He dropped it in. Inside was a flash drive containing a recording. Maybe they'll be interested. Who knows? He mused. Perhaps Art's lawyers aren't as formidable as he believes. With that, he proceeded to the security line. 9 months later, Tom found himself seated at his usual spot in a cafe. Anna, as charming as ever, brought him his beer. "Thanks, dear," he said, lifting the bottle to his lips. A piece of mail caught his attention. He held the envelope in his hands. Devoid of a return address, he pondered who might have tracked him down, while he hadn't taken elaborate measures to conceal himself. Locating him in a small town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would require resources beyond the norm. His initial suspicion was that Art's associates had located him. He left the envelope untouched for 2 days, cautious but certain it wasn't a bomb. "Carlos," Tom called out to the cafe owner, "do you have a knife?" "See, Mr. Tom," Carlos replied. Tom handed him the envelope and stepped back cautiously. "You can never be too careful," he reminded himself as Carlos opened it. Carlos passed the contents to Tom, who thanked him. Taking another sip of his beer, he turned over the envelope. Several sheets of paper slid onto the table, including a note that simply read, "Thought you might be interested," with a telephone number instead of a signature. The same number, Troy would have the means to locate him, Tom surmised. "I can live with that." He flipped through another sheet, revealing a newspaper article with a photograph. The image depicted Pete, Bill, Alice, and Betty being escorted out of the CR building in handcuffs. The headline proclaimed, "4 accused of multi-million-dollar procurement fraud." Tom couldn't help but smile. Maybe Art's legal team isn't as formidable as he presumed, he mused, a habit he picked up due to his limited Spanish and a fondness for hearing English spoken, even if it was only by himself. "Anna, another beer, please," he requested, extending his empty bottle. "Sure thing, Mr. Tom," Anna replied. "Thank you, Anna," he acknowledged, taking a sip and gazing out at the vast expanse of the deep blue Pacific Ocean.